Part 29. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 282. Over the years, he had been deliberately captured by humans many times, once on a ship to Cambodia, once in a freak show, and once willing to be taken home by a human woman, which was originally Sira's home. He waited there for a long time. When he got tired of it, he learned from the woman named Anasi that Sira had gone to the capital to study abroad and she would not come back. So he left there again and returned to the ocean to wait for a chance to meet her again. Sira ran into the old cabin. Based on her familiarity with the structure of the ship, she roughly knew where the infirmary was. She groped for it and then went inside to look around. All the medicines have expired, and only some medical equipment can be used. She carried the box and ran back along the beach. The mermaid was still lying there motionless, her blood dyeing the dark sand and seawater around her. Sierra took a deep breath, knelt beside him and leaned close to his chest. She heard the heart still beating under his chest. She immediately took out medical tweezers and other tools, turned around and touched his injured tail. Luo Syed looked at the girl kneeling next to her, her slender back curved, her side face expression serious, her brown hair hanging on her cheeks. She was extremely beautiful. His body hurt, but a smile appeared on his face. His spouse is so beautiful, even more beautiful than in the dream. Sira carefully clipped out the bullet stuck in the flesh of the fish tail, and a stream of blood suddenly emerged from it. The giant black fish tail bent slightly in pain and surrounded her unknowingly. She originally wanted to hold the bleeding hole with gauze, but soon realized something was wrong. The wound where the bullet had been removed was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. She didn't even need to wrap gauze around him. The area healed automatically and new scales grew, in about 10 seconds. She turned her head in shock, and the tip of her nose almost hit her bare, strong chest. Rawside sat up, his webbed paws lightly touching her hand holding the tweezers. Sierra's fingertips trembled, and she looked up at him. Under the setting sun, his charming and handsome face made her lose consciousness for a moment. Luo Syed liked the way she was obsessed with her beauty. He lowered his head and kissed her on the cheek. "Sela, you are welcome." With her intimate movements and completely trusting tone, every step this mermaid made was unexpected by Sira. Her face suddenly turned red and she turned away her head. "Can you stop moving yet? My abdomen is bleeding badly." Luo Syed understood. He leaned back obediently, revealing the perfectly curved mermaid line on his abdomen. The blood blooming on it added a tragic beauty to this figure. Sira felt her cheeks were a little hot. She quickly lowered her head and used a tool to dig out the bullet in his abdomen. Looking at the rapidly healing wound, she sighed in her heart. Did the royal family and the Ocean Academy collaborate to capture mermaids? Did they also have this idea? This instant healing ability is incredible. Sira took care of all the wounds on his body, feeling a little uncomfortable. After soaking in the sea water for so long and being blown by the sea breeze, her head felt dizzy. "I've already taken care of it for you." She covered her forehead and shivered, looking weakly at the mermaid who had been staring at her. "It looks like nothing is serious. Can you go back to the sea by yourself?" The giant fish's tail was gathered up, and she was gently lifted onto its tail. The silver-haired mermaid held her in her arms. Sierra leaned against his chest without any strength and hummed softly, "Please don't take me into the water, I feel a little uncomfortable." Rockside's tail fin was raised up as a leg, his lower body stood upright, and he held the girl in his arms and moved towards the ship like a snake. Sira's eyelids were heavy and her vision became increasingly blurry. At the end, she had a high fever and knew nothing. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 283. In a hazy state, warm liquid was poured into her mouth, but there was a cold temperature on her lips. She groaned in discomfort and unconsciously tried to push the thing away with her hands, but was restrained and unable to move. Luosiet kissed her tenderly, kissing her repeatedly, spreading his long tail on the bed, wrapping her body tightly. It wasn't until he noticed that her breathing was not smooth that he reluctantly let go of her, rubbed her cheek and whispered, "It will be fine soon." After sleeping for a day and a night, Sierra woke up. Her naked body was curled up in a strange embrace, with silver hair wrapped around her body and something strange stepping on the soles of her feet. The hard scales seemed to be warmed by her body temperature, and they would move and scratch her skin from time to time. Sierra's mind, which was still a little dazed, suddenly woke up. She raised her head suddenly and looked into a pair of lake blue eyes that held the stars and the sea. "You're awake." The beautiful mermaid lowered her head and gently rubbed her cheek. She put her hands down on his smooth chest and slowly lowered her head. What was beneath her feet was indeed his curved fish tail. The scales were black and shiny, and they contracted and pressed closer to her from time to time. "Did you save me?" Her face turned red involuntarily, and she pulled the thin quilt next to her to cover her, "But you can't take off my clothes at will." "It's wet." Luosiet pointed to a set of skirts thrown away not far from the bed. They were piled together in a wet pile. It looked like they could no longer be worn. Sierra was speechless for a moment. She pulled the quilt and moved out of his arms to get out of bed. As soon as she made this gesture, Roxad mistakenly thought that she was going to run away. He quickly pulled her back with his long arms and pressed her into his arms. Sierra was forced to ride on his tail. The quilt fell off, her cheeks suddenly turned red. "What are you doing?" He licked his lips, held her waist, and asked her awkwardly, "Where are you going?" "Go to the toilet, please let go, do you understand?" "I need to go to the toilet." Sierra stepped on his tail with her foot and crushed it hard. "Don't wrap it around me." Luosiet understood, obediently let go of his hand, and watched her rush into the bathroom wrapped in quilt. A smile appeared on his lips. He thought for a moment, controlled his tail to get out of bed, and went to another room to look for something. There was no water in the bathroom. When Sierra came out after using the toilet, she was still a little troubled by her current situation. Outside the window is the endless ocean. She was taken to their island by the mermaid. The people on the ship made the mermaid angry and died. How can she go back now? Sierra thought of Nicole and bit her lip harder, not knowing how she was doing. She dragged the quilt and walked out, but she stepped on a few black scales under her feet and got stuck in the cracks of the rough floor. It was left by the mermaid walking with its tail. She frowned. It would be quite painful if she scratched it directly. A squeaking sound came from outside the bedroom. Sierra immediately looked up and was stunned for a moment. The mermaid, who stood almost 2 meters tall, had silver hair shawl, and slowly came to her with a huge box in his hand. Behind him were scales stuck in the rusty floor. "What are you doing?" She couldn't help but walk over and get closer to him. "For you." Lashid pushed the box forward and used his fingernails to break the lock. Sierra bent over and opened it, and was dazzled by the piles of jewelry and gorgeous dresses inside. She raised her head, her eyes fluttering, and said in shock, "You want to give it all to me?" His beautiful face was close to hers, and the fingers with retracted nails gently touched her fair and thin shoulders. "You wear it, it looks beautiful." Sierra blushed again and said calmly, "Thank you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 284. She pulled out a skirt at random and looked up at him again. "I'm going to change clothes." Before she could say the words "Can you avoid suspicion," Luosiet clicked his thin lower jaw and quickly turned around with his tail. "You change, I won't peek." Sierra's eyes were astonished. She didn't expect that the fish knew how to avoid it without her asking. On the night when the boat capsized, she could clearly see that the female mermaids were not wearing clothes and did not know how to cover up at all. In this comparison, this beautiful male mermaid appears to be extremely special. His IQ seems to be that of a commander, and everyone listens to him. Thinking about it like this, Sierra felt it was impossible. If it was really one of the protagonists, Roxt, then he should be with Anish in Cambania County. Maybe he was just a temporary leader or something. Sierra shook her head, not wanting to think about it. She hid in the bedroom and changed into her skirt, smoothed her long knotted hair, and walked out dragging her soft long skirt. The mermaid stood quietly at the door. When she saw her appearance, her eyes lit up. Pretty. His webbed paws lightly touched her cheek, and then he spread his palms in front of her. In his palms was a beautiful shell bracelet, made of full, round, colorful pearls and white shells. Sierra stretched out her hand to take it, her pupils trembling slightly. It's very beautiful, the workmanship is great. She looked up at him and asked puzzledly, but why did you give it to me? Luosied bent down, took her into his arms, and kissed the top of her hair. You belong to me, it's yours. How does it feel to be loved by a mermaid at first sight and take it as a confession? Sarah sat on the rusty steps outside the ship, unable to regain consciousness for a long time. What she experienced in just 2 days was incredible to her. A coconut suddenly hit her feet and startled her. She turned her head and saw the beautiful mermaid climbing up the steps with difficulty with his tail. The rusty steps kept rubbing off his scales. Don't come up, I'm going down. Sierra quickly picked up the coconut, stood up and ran towards him, but the hem of her skirt was too long and caught her feet, so she fell down the steps. Luoside's eyes tightened, and he subconsciously rushed over and reached out to catch her. The weak girl bumped into his arms. He tightened his arms and quickly stepped back down the steps, holding her in his arms and moving to the beach. Sierra, who was still frightened, tugged on a bunch of his silver hair, looked at the perfect sculpture-like profile in the sun, and blushed quietly. She really can't resist beautiful things, especially beautiful and special species, which greatly satisfies a certain quirk in her psychology. Well, I can walk by myself. Lucid stopped and finally sat on a pile of dry sand with her in his arms. He tore open the outer layer of the leaf with his bare hands, stretched out his sharp nails to poke a small hole in it, and handed it to her. Eat it. Sierra took it and took a sip. The juice was so sweet that she squinted her eyes. It tastes good. The drink was too strong, and a lot of it leaked from the corner of her lips. Luoxid's eyes darkened, and he suddenly leaned forward and licked off the liquid on her chin. The wet and hot tongue rubbed across her chin, and the tiny barbs rubbed against the skin. Sierra trembled all over and froze. She rolled her eyes and looked at the mermaid in front of her, and unconsciously softened. What are you doing? So sweet. He smiled slightly, his beauty dazzling others. Sierra's heart was about to beat out of her chest. She wiped her chin casually, held up a coconut to try to cover her red face, and gulped down the juice to cool herself down. Luosied looked at her quietly, full of tenderness. He thought that in order to have better communication, he was going to take out the stacked books on the ship and take a look. He wanted so much to talk to her more, to be close to her, to kiss her more. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 285. After drinking the coconut water, Luosied took the coconut and easily broke it into 2 pieces, revealing the tender white pulp inside. His level of care really amazed Sarah. After eating half of the coconut meat, she shook her head and stopped. Luosied lost the remaining half, and 2 mermaids appeared on the sea not far away, each carrying 2 people on their bodies. It's Nicole and Edward. Sierra's eyes lit up, and she immediately stood up to check on Nicole, and found that she had just fainted. She immediately breathed a sigh of relief and nodded to the mermaid who rescued Nicole and thanked her. "Thank you for not killing her." Terry glanced at Nicole, who was as pale as paper, touched the lip that she had bitten hard, and turned back into the water. Next to him, Edward coughed violently and was dragged in front of Logosied by two mermaids. He glanced at Syrah, worried that she would see something bad, and muttered something to the tribe. The weak Edward was dragged into the forest by the two mermaids. He began to scream and shouted for help to Sierra. His expression was frightened, and he completely lost the proud look he had on the boat. Syrah did not look back when she heard the shout. She still remembers the night when he lay on her. Without these mermaids, she would have lost her virginity and been completely ruined. She didn't want to care about this perverted life and death at all. "What will happen to him?" she just asked the silver-haired mermaid. Logosied thought for a while and replied word for word, "It's the same as the mermaid stuck on the long pole. He would pierce Edward's body and leave him standing in the bushes to be eaten by mosquitoes." Sierra nodded. "Oh, can you help me take Nicole to the ship?" Rawside called Terry over to take Nicole away, and he moved his tail to hold her hand. "Let's go." He took her to the library on the ship. There were thousands of books on the bookshelf inside. He randomly took out one and put it into her hand. "What is this for?" Sierra blinked. "More talk." Logosied nodded his mouth and touched the book again. "He can communicate simply, but not very smoothly, so I hope she can interact with her more." Sierra was stunned for a moment. "Do you want me to read to you?" Logosied raised a beautiful smile and nodded his chin. Seeing how well behaved he was, Sierra couldn't help but tiptoe to touch his head, and said softly, "Okay." There were no lights on the ship at night, so she found a few long unused gas lamps to light them up and sat on the sofa in front of the fireplace. Luxid sat at her feet with his tail folded, his hands folded on her legs, his chin resting lightly on her, and his long silver hair spread all over the floor. Syrah held up the book and looked at the eager-to-learn mermaid head on her lap, and her heart went out of control. She swallowed silently and moved her eyes away to read the book. She always felt that this mermaid was seducing her intentionally or unintentionally. "Ahem, the book I want to read is..." "Huh? Mermaid." Sierra choked and looked down at him again. "You want me to tell you this?" Logosied nodded, rubbing the skirt on her legs with his fingertips, and brushed her thighs from time to time. "Tell me." "Syrah, a long time ago." While telling the same old story, she focused her attention on that hand, and her thigh was numb when he rubbed it. Luxid didn't seem to notice her embarrassment. His fan-shaped ears stood up and he listened attentively. "If he turns into legs, will the prince fall in love with her?" Syrah thought for a while. "The order of appearance is important, you see. The first thing he saw when he woke up was the princess." Logosied's eyes darkened. He raised his head and asked her, "Tell me, am I the first to know you?" Sierra was stunned. "Huh? What does this mean?" "After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore." Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 286. "There are others like me." He paused, as if thinking about words, and then said, "Species like me." Syrah blinked. "Do you mean the one with a tail like you?" "Probably, something special like this." Logosied curled up his fingers nervously, but his hidden nails accidentally hooked the silk thread on her skirt. He acted extremely nervous, and Sierra could see it. She didn't know the reason but still answered honestly, "No, you are the special creature I have seen for the first time in this world for a long time." Luoshid's eyes lit up, and he actually held the sofa on both sides of her legs with both hands, leaned over and kissed her lips. The cold moisture on her lips made Syrah freeze up, and the book she was holding tightly fell onto her lap, then rolled down and hit the entangled fish tail. Logosied gently stroked her lips and took a step away before she was about to retreat. Thank you. Sierra touched her lips with trembling hands, her face turned red, and she pushed him away. Why do you have to say thank you to me after doing such a thing? It's so shameful to be so close to a mermaid. She stood up and wanted to leave, but was hooked by his tail fin and fell back into his arms. After a short scream, she sat on the mermaid's long tail. Smooth and white arms were wrapped around her waist. The charming mermaid turned her head and nibbled on her neck. You are not that prince. You are not that stupid. You are mine. Sierra's legs under the skirt were squeezed and entangled by the fish's tail. She struggled, her voice couldn't stop trembling. Can you let me get off first? Loosiad nuzzled her, but he couldn't bear to really scare people, so he let go of his hand obediently. Sierra got up and lifted up her skirt, then ran out of the library and back to the big bedroom, stepping on a few scales that fell here. She lowered her head and looked at the dark scales, rubbed her hot face, and couldn't calm down. When a mermaid has just killed a boatload of people, and you are the only survivor, he falls in love with you at first sight, and is so well behaved and unbelievably human that he uses tricks to seduce you. Is this true? Sierra even wanted to doubt what kind of fruits love could bear in life and through the killings on the waves. She even thought about conspiracy theories. Is this overly clever mermaid planning something, but is there anything in her that he can gain from? She has no clue. Loosiad dragged his tail and slowly moved to the bedroom. Sella, can you tell me a story tomorrow? Sierra turned back and bit her lip. Okay, but I want to sleep by myself tonight, so you can go back to the sea. The disappointment was obvious on the mermaid's face, and he slowly withdrew. Okay. The fishtail made a scraping sound on the rough floor. Seeing him so lonely, Sierra felt a little guilty. Well, if you really want to sleep here, there is a bathtub in the bathroom, maybe you can ask someone to get some water. Loosiad turned his head sharply, his lake blue eyes glowing faintly in the dark, like a mysterious firefly lake that could suck people in. Sierra's heart skipped a beat. She moved her eyes away, coughed slightly, and said, I just think your tail always stays out of the water, and scales fall to the ground when it's dry. It hurts a lot. A smile formed on his lips and he nodded. It doesn't hurt very much, but I like it. He paused. I like that Sierra cares about me. Sierra covered her face and collapsed. Okay, stop looking at me with such a seductive expression. You can go get some water. I want to sleep as soon as possible. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 287. Loosiad thought she was very beautiful even when she was shy now. He really wanted to hold her in his arms and kiss her hard, but she would be afraid. He had to control his nature. He was the first to show up to her, they still had a lot of time, he had to take his time. Finally, Loosiad dragged the bathtub from the bathroom to the bedroom and placed it next to the bed. After filling it with water, he climbed in, soaked half of his tail in it, and rested most of his tail fin outside, patting the bathtub from time to time. Itch. When Sierra fell asleep and turned around on the bed, she could see Roxt putting his hands on his chin and resting his elbows on the edge of the bathtub, staring at her intensely. She thought she might not be able to sleep tonight. Good night. Good night, Sierra. A dreamless night. Early the next morning, a high-pitched scream woke Sarah. She opened her eyes in confusion, and after hearing the voice clearly coming from Nicole, she hurriedly got out of bed to look for her. The two women met on the ship's porch and embraced each other excitedly. Nicole cried incoherently and said, When I woke up in the morning, I saw a fishtail wrapped around me. I was scared to death. I thought I was being used as a food reserve. Sierra saw Terry standing not far away. also a beautiful and indifferent mermaid. She patted her shoulder comfortingly, "It's okay. These mermaids won't hurt us and are very friendly to us." After talking for a while, Nicole's stomach growled, and she covered it in embarrassment, "I'm so hungry." Sierra thought for a while, "Wait a minute." She turned around and walked into the bedroom. The mermaid in the bathtub had already come out of the water. She controlled her tail and came to her, "Sierra." She always heard him call her, and Sierra realized that she had never asked him what his name was. She raised her head and said, "Can you get some more coconut or fish? I'm hungry." She touched her belly and made gestures. A smile appeared in Luosied's eyes, and he bent down and put his webbed paws gently on her belly. "I understand." Sierra's ears turned red, and she pushed his hand away. Her voice was softer than she even noticed, "I haven't asked you yet, do you have a name? If I want to talk to you in the future, I don't know what to call you." Luosied understood, and while following her outside, he translated his ancient name and said to her, "Luelevenda." With a slight mermaid language accent, the low words came from the throat. For a moment, Sierra thought she had heard wrong. "What's your name?" She froze on the spot, looking up at him, her lips trembling a little. "Tell me again, what's your name?" Seeing her reaction, Luosied was a little confused, but he still obeyed and repeated, "Luelevenda." Sierra was completely confused, lost-eyed. Yes, he nodded and wanted to get closer to her to hold her hand, but the girl suddenly took several steps back, shock and disbelief mixed on her face. Luosied was hurt by her evasive action, his eyes darkened, and he said aggrievedly, "You don't like this name." Sierra opened her eyes wide and leaned into Nicole's arms, trembling, "No, it's not that I don't like it." She forced herself to calm down, but her fingers kept trembling. The strange feelings she had for this mermaid for so many days disappeared completely in an instant. This is Anaxi's mermaid. Logically speaking, she has been in love with her in Cambodia County for a long time. How could she appear here? Sierra tried to calm her voice, "Well, I'm a little surprised." "What happened to you?" Luosied didn't like the way she distanced herself from him. He frowned and said, "If you hate this name and it has special meaning to you, we can change it. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore." Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 288. Sierra waved her hand, "No, it's not about the name, I just need to digest it." She didn't know what went wrong, and Anna 11 hadn't met this mermaid until now, and this fish became very interesting to her. As she hurried out of the cabin, the sun was shining brightly outside, bringing the slightest warmth to her cold heart. After being shocked by Rox's beauty, Nicole ran out after her and asked worriedly, "Why do you have such a big reaction? That mermaid seems to be just telling you his name." Sierra shook her head, "It's okay, I'm just a little surprised." What's not to understand about a name? She couldn't answer Nicole's question. The two sat in silence on the beach for a while, and then 2 coconuts rolled to their feet. Terry didn't know when he got into the sea, and threw in 2 big live lobsters and fish. He grunted a few times and said a few words that they couldn't understand. "Don't sit here, the mermaids will come up later." He said it several times but they couldn't understand it, so they had to give up and get back into the water. Luosied stuck to Sierra's side again, helped her open 2 coconuts, and carefully handled the lobsters and live fish with his nails. Nicole watched the whole process, her jaw dropped in shock. He is so smart and knows how to process food like a human being. Has he ever been on land? Is this possible? Sierra pursed her lower lip, and when she saw the aggrieved eyes that Luosied looked at from time to time, she felt that it was really possible. He can talk and learn so fast, it's like he already knows it, and he only needs to look at a book to understand it again. She thought for a while, then mustered up the courage to ask, "Have you ever been ashore before?" Lucid cut the fish into thin slices, put it together with the lobster meat into a leaf and handed it to her, saying in a magnetic voice, "I've been ashore." After eating a few pieces of sashimi, Sierra pushed everything in front of Nicole, raised her head and asked him, "Well, then why are you back here?" Luoxiet thought for a while and said honestly, "Without you, there would be no you on the land." Nicole choked a few times when she heard what was almost a confession. "His pronunciation is really good. Is he attracted to you?" Sierra didn't blush this time and was very calm. She only knew that this mermaid belonged to Anna 11, and it must be that for some reason, they hadn't met yet. She took a sip of coconut water and said, "I want to go back to land. Can you let me go back?" Luoxiet fell silent. "Isn't it good here? Green islands, beautiful oceans, endless seafood, and a peaceful life are quite good." Sierra couldn't deny this, but she couldn't stay with a mermaid who had an owner. She thought she might as well do a good deed. "I have a home in Cumbonia County. I haven't seen my father for a long time. I originally planned to go back and visit after finishing my studies. I want to go home." If everything goes well, she can take the mermaid to Anna 11, and she will build a boat to go to the capital. Someone from the Ocean Academy will have to report the news, and only 2 people will die in the boat, which can also be used to warn them not to do research. How to capture mermaids and use them. Luoxiet thought for a long time and asked after a while, "Will you take me away?" Sierra nodded, "If you want to go with me, then go together, but since the land on your tail is dangerous, I hope you can think about it carefully." After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 289. Before I could get the answer, a wave suddenly surged on the water, and the colorful tails of several mermaids emerged from the water, sometimes overlapping and sometimes entangled. On the magnificent sea, the mermaids were kissing and affectionate in front of the people on the beach, their eyes full of desire. The sound of splashing water was echoed by the slapping of tail fins. Sierra and Nicole were stunned by the chaotic scene of a large gathering. "Is this mating?" Sierra took a long time to find her voice. After receiving a positive answer from Lucid, her cheeks turned hot and she quickly turned around. "Nicole, let's go for a walk in the woods and come out later." Nicole's eyes were wide open, as if she was researching. She didn't know what she saw, and her tone became excited. "Sierra, although their body structure is different in the tail, the organs in special parts are very similar to ours." Similar. The instinct of a researcher is to observe, but there was a mermaid beside Sierra who was eyeing her covetously, and she did not have the courage to look back. She walked quickly into the woods, and Rawside followed her, manipulating his tail like a snake. "You don't like tails," he said this in a declarative tone. "You like me having legs." Sierra moved her lips and asked curiously, "Does it mean that if I hope you have legs, you will grow them?" She remembered that this was the kind of treatment only an 11 received. For the sake of the heroine, the mermaid is willing to endure pain and split her legs, just to stay with her lover. Luoxiet stopped his tail, took her wrist, and whispered, "Yes. If she likes legs, he will satisfy her. In short, he will never give her to anyone else again." Sierra looked up at him. There was no joke in her lake blue eyes. She bit her lip and said, "Okay, then you go ahead and do it. I want Lockside with 2 legs." After saying this, she didn't know what was wrong with her. Her chest felt hotter than ever, and she also had a strong sense of curiosity. Will she replace Anashi? This seems impossible, that is the heroine of the second game. Sierra's mind was a little confused, and she had a vague expectation that she couldn't explain. The mermaid's estrus period lasted for 3 days. During these 3 days, the sea surface was always rough and there was no calm. Roxt was also missing. Terry, the only mermaid, was guarding the 2 women on the beach. His eyes always stayed on Nicole, who became familiar with each other after coming and going. Nicole always went to Terry with a notebook in hand. Her research on mermaids made her curious and enthusiastic. Terry didn't object to this, and what Nicole did most, besides pulling out his scales, was touch his body. The skin of human fingers was extremely soft. When they touched a smooth film on the surface of the body, the electric touch made Terry understand why the leader liked to be with Syrah. Syrah hadn't seen Loseed for a few days, and couldn't help but wonder if he had really gone to fission legs. She didn't know what kind of process it took for a mermaid to transform into legs, but one afternoon, the always turbulent seaside became calm, and mermaid heads emerged from the water, all looking towards a certain direction to the east. Go. Nicole was the first to notice something coming over there, and quickly called Syrah, come out quickly. There is movement in the sea. She hurriedly put down her book and ran out of the cabin to the beach. Not far from her, there was a huge wave in the water, and the black-tailed mermaid was quickly washed ashore. His long silver hair spread out from behind, and the blue stripes of blood on his snow-white back floated under the thin skin, covering his whole body, and he looked extremely ferocious. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 290. Syrah was frightened and rushed over, Loseed. He let out a beastly roar from his mouth, his giant long tail slapped the beach, and his whole body curled up in pain. When his handsome face looked sideways at Syrah, he barely maintained his consciousness, and his bloodless thin lips roared out a strange human voice, do not come near me. Sierra stopped suddenly when she was 1 meter away from him, speaking anxiously and incoherently, what's the matter with you? He couldn't answer her words. The sharp dorsal fin on his arched back trembled, and a line cracked under the texture. The black dorsal fin retracted at a speed visible to the naked eye, and a fission appeared in the middle of the black tail fin, as if being hardened by a pair of invisible hands. Torn apart raw. Sierra understood instantly, stood there, and lost her voice, you have found a way to turn into legs, haven't you? Rock's webbed claws that were stuck in the sand also began to split. The transparent film tore open, revealing the 10 completely separated fingers. The tip nails also continued to retract until they degenerated and grew into a human-like appearance. The blue veins on his face were bulging and intertwined with blue blood. He looked extremely ferocious and strangely beautiful. The scene was so tragic and shocking that Syrah's legs went limp and she knelt on the sand, her eyes red and speechless. Her heart was twisted into a ball and was being pulled outwards by a force, which was extremely painful. Loseed's ears also began to change. The original fan-shaped ears seemed to be squeezed into smaller auricles, and he roared unbearably for a while in pain. A large number of mermaids floated on the water to watch the changes in their leader, and from time to time they whispered quickly to communicate with each other the extent of his current changes. Nicole stood behind with a notebook and was recording frantically. Terry dragged his heavy fishtail over, took away her notebook, and said his first words of resistance in days, you shouldn't be in this kind of situation. Time, research. He spoke stumblingly, and under Nicole's surprised gaze, he added, we are the same. Mermaids or humans, they are all the same, and they should not become just someone's accessory and research product. Nicole pursed her lips, an apology appeared on her face, I'm sorry. Her mentality is indeed not right. After staying in the academy for a long time, she has subconsciously regarded mermaids as research objects. However, they are so smart and not very different from humans. She should not face them with a curious attitude. Nicole pursed her lips and asked softly, why did he turn into legs? Terry pointed to Sierra who was kneeling on the ground, what she asked for. Syrah heard the conversation behind her, feeling uncomfortable and shocked. Loxida's legs were really split because of her, which was enough to prove that he treated her differently, and even the heroine in 11 couldn't compare with him. I don't know how long it took, but Roxide's tail transformation was coming to an end. The twin tails that split from the tail fins took the form of human legs, which were just legs covered with scales. The black scales slowly disappeared under a smooth film. The color began to gradually fade, getting closer to the color of human skin. His struggle subsided, and he fell to the beach with all his strength lost. His smooth back was crisscrossed, and his waist was narrow and covered with sweat. Sierra walked over and knelt down, gently raised his head and rested it on her lap. She brushed away the silver hair on the fair face with her fingers, revealing a pair of lake blue eyes covered with a layer of mist. They are completely human eyes. Loosied was exhausted, but he still appreciated the expression on her heart for him at this moment. He asked weakly in a deep voice, "Do you still like it?" Sierra. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 291. The moment she met his clear eyes, Sierra felt so soft in her heart. She bent down and hugged his head, and said in a trembling voice, "I like you, but why did you change your tail because of me? There is no other girl you like in your heart. Only you." Loosied rubbed her cheek affectionately and whispered, "I've been waiting for you for too long." Sierra didn't understand, so she stepped away and stared at him blankly. "Please believe that you were born to belong to me." Loosied raised his head and took the opportunity to kiss her lips. The water in his lake blue eyes rippled. "We should have been partners. Not Anaxi, just her, Sierra, who was born to be his mate." After understanding, Sierra licked her lips, and the faint salty taste of seawater entered her mouth, which was the water stain he had just left. Okay, her eyes moved away from his face unnaturally, along the narrow waist, and when she found somewhere, she suddenly blushed and looked back. There is no obstruction at all on those straight and beautiful long legs. Sierra hurriedly took off her coat, covered Loosied's body, and asked softly, "Can you try to stand up? How about I help you go to the ship to rest, and take a shower on the way?" Loosied nodded and tried to control his legs to bend his knees to stand. He had never had such a novel experience. His feet were soft in the sand and he had no idea how to act. Just as Sierra was about to pull him away, he tried to step out with both feet at the same time, but ended up not being able to lift either one, and he fell flat on his face facing the sand. "Does it hurt?" Sierra squatted down in shock and helped his arm. Watching him turn his handsome face covered with gravel, she couldn't help but be amused and laughed out loud. She found it funny, and Loosied also raised his lips. "You are very happy." Sierra suppressed her smile and said, "I'm sorry, even beginners learn to walk like this." She put her shoulder against his armpit as a support. "Come on, I'll help you walk slowly. We have a lot of time to learn." Luxid was pleased by her words, and his magnetic voice catered to her. "We have a lot of time." He put a hand on Sierra's shoulder and tried to stand up again. Seeing that the coat on his hips was about to slip off, Sierra immediately pulled it with his hands, and the back of her hand brushed against his legs through the fabric, his heart beating like thunder. After finally tying a knot on the side of her hip, she took a deep breath and said, "Step up with your right foot first." Loosied took a step forward in cooperation, and heard the soft voice gently praise, "It's great, I'm stepping on my left foot." He stepped out with his left foot and stood firmly together with his legs together. Sierra said happily, "I'm trying it alternately. I think I can get used to it after walking for a while." The afterglow of the setting sun stretched the shadows of the two of them on the beach. Lucid suddenly thought that in that dream that made him despair, on the day he changed his legs, he fell down on the beach countless times and broke his body. Only then does the skin try to truly stand up and walk like a human being. Now Sarah is by his side, participating in the whole process of him getting his legs, carefully teaching him to learn to walk. What a wonderful feeling it is. He suddenly held her in his arms, raised her chin, and covered her bright red lips in her surprised eyes. Sierra trembled all over, and put her hands on his muscular abdomen. She obviously wanted to push him away, but in the end she didn't want to let him go. She opened her hands and slowly hugged his thin waist. She only knew Roxid for a short time, but besides being frightened, she also liked him and liked the surging love from this mermaid.